Has Claude Code felt dumber since the last update? You run your favorite lead gen skill only to get back what appears to be 2,000 words of unnecessary ramblings from a drunk man. It might not be entirely Claude's fault, but we still love to blame it. In this video, I'm going to show you exactly what's causing the problem, how to fix it, and how I cut my skill bloat by 70% so that you can finally get over your Claude rage and give your significant other some peace and quiet. Let's get into it. And there we go. After quite some time, you can see that this thing has finished through 12 iterations, scoring from its baseline to running without any skill and then stitching everything back. We were able to cut our skill by 56% just by removing that prose that the skill didn't need in the first place. Everything inside our skill now earns its place, and we've proven that with data and testing. Okay, the first thing I want you guys to do is hit /doctor anywhere in your console, wherever you're using Claude. That's filled with your trash heap of skills that need some kind of fixing. That will then output this large magical report telling you everything that's currently wrong with your AI operating system. I have a full video deep dive that I'll link down below on this specifically. More importantly though, we really want to grab our most used skills over here, because the thing that we're going to be doing right now, we don't want to run it on every single skill. I imagine you have a bunch of skills that you don't really use that often, and it's pointless to start with those. We should be starting at the ones that we use every single day, because those are obviously most problematic. So all I did here after I ran Doctor was I told this thing to tell me what my most used skills are, and then it went and grabbed those. So then what I did, because we want to run this in an isolated environment, I told it to grab the 10 most used skills and just chuck it into an entirely new repo. You can use plain English for this. Just tell it that you want to put it in a new VS Code workspace that you can then manipulate with nothing else in it. You don't want to carry over any of this other crap that you've got lying around in your AI operating system, because then it's going to skew the test. All we want are our skills. And so here we are in my test environment. I've moved over a bunch of skills, and I just told this thing to go and run ablation on my news monitor skill. Ablation being the worst word in the English language. Perhaps 10 people have already dropped off of this video by now due to that. But we need to focus on this because it's a very specific process, and it's actually a technical term for what they do for this type of testing. So while this thing is running through its very long process over here, I'm going to explain to you how this skill actually works, and it's really quite simple. But before we do that, we need to talk a little bit about the problem. So context engineering is about giving the agent just the right amount of information in order to complete the goal or task, whatever it is that you want done. With older models, that just a little bit of information used to be a lot longer. It used to be a lot more verbose, and we used to have to give it a lot more direction than we do now. So what's happening with these new models, because context engineering for the most part is still the same thing. We're trying to give it just enough information to complete its goal. But that amount of information has changed. And because we've stashed everything in places like our skills, and then we also have a system prompt, we also have the request where some people are putting in a lot of information in there, it's actually trying to please us, and it's spending all of its thinking budget on trying to resolve these different rules or clauses that we have inside our tasks that we're giving it. And that's why our output sometimes turns to mush. It's because of that confusion between the instructions that it needs to resolve. When in reality, all we need to do is give this thing just a little bit of guidelines and more room to roam. Think of it like a highly skilled consultant coming to your business. He knows everything about what you need him to do. So instead of giving him a 500-page handbook that tells him things that he doesn't really need to know, you just give him a one-pager, giving him enough context to know how he gets to his goal and then verifies that goal. That's what we're trying to do now. And that ties in with what everyone is saying. A lot of people are saying skills are dead. You don't need them anymore. That's just a load of shit. You absolutely do need skills. It's about what's inside the skill that matters more now. We want that single one-pager instead of that really large manual. And that's where this skill comes in, the ablation loop. There goes another 10 viewers. It can be a pretty technical thing, but it's actually really simple in nature. What we're doing over here is we're deleting specific context from what we're doing. You can delete the entire skill, you can delete little sections from it, but the point is we're trying to rebuild in a very smart way. So we remove the skill or the information from the skill, we then use it, measure what the agent outputs, we check its failures, we see where it failed, and we mark that down. And then we add back specific things layer by layer until we've rebuilt the skill, but a lot smaller, and it only has the exact things that we need for these new models. Every single thing inside there needs to earn its place, more so than it did when we used to write skill. And if you're thinking to yourself, cool, okay, so we're just making this shorter, the answer is no. It's not about the length, it's about the measurement of what goes in there. The quality of the information that we are providing it is a lot more accurate than just going in there and saying, cool, go and write this skill. The skill builder goes and does something and comes back with 300 lines of something that it doesn't really need. We'll get into that in just a second. The point is here, there is no more guessing. We are very precisely measuring exactly what this thing needs. Okay, so while those other two are running, we can kick off another one and I'll show you what the process looks like. So let's just say we wanted the YouTube SEO skill. Run skill ablation on my YouTube SEO skill. And you can see as it runs, the first thing that it does is run this thing called classify audit. So the reason that I put that in there is because skills have different types. For instance, inside our skill, we have just a bunch of scripts and then we have a bunch of pros. So pros being the English language that fills this thing and is usually what bloats it. The scripts are the deterministic things that actually get the work done for us. Every single time these things run, they will run in the way that we want them to run. And we need that for this reliability as a part of what skills bring us. And that means that we have different types of tests over here. For instance, with a script, it either works or it doesn't. That's pretty binary. And we don't even need AI to judge that. You can just get scripts to judge that type of thing. So what we're doing here at the classification phase is we're checking, does the skill actually do anything that requires AI judgment or has something where the English language is actually benefiting it? If the answer is yes, then it gets classified as taste, in which case it goes down a different path. If not, it's more deterministic, in which case this thing can just say, cool, it's either going to pass and the scripts will work or it's not, and then we mark it as a pass and a fail. So the one is a lot easier than the other. And classification is important here because even though we have our separate grader or judge who's going to be looking over this, we as the humans most certainly still need to be involved in taste, because even though we can kind of match it to some definition of good and it can read images now and things like that, you're still going to be the gate that defines the final taste on the output of the product. Versus something that's more deterministic, you really don't need to care about that because, like I said, it either works or it doesn't. Then as this thing progresses, you can see that it starts to investigate the skill and everything that's inside it because it needs to build some kind of baseline. It needs to look at what the skill actually looks like now so that when it does start to remove things, it has something to compare it to. And importantly, what we're doing over here is we're building some kind of grader. So it knows that this is good as it is. It runs, it does its job. So the grader knows what a pass looks like. Then we create failure opportunities as well. So we get this thing to run without anything and we mark down all of the failures. Those failures are important because they build what our grader will ultimately be able to understand. And that's important to understand because the grader is pretty much everything before the human gets involved. So if we look over here, right now we're taking all of that output from these baseline tests that we're doing when we build our oracle or grader over here. And it's either going to pass or it's going to fail. But unless we have something for the oracle to understand what good and bad look like, we could never possibly score this thing, in which case you wouldn't get a proper result. And once we've done that, it's actually pretty easy in terms of what the loop does. It just runs the skill as it is in its full prose with like 250 lines, and it runs another one without anything inside it. Then it starts to write down wherever it broke in the process. And that's very important because every single one of those things that break, it tells us something that was needed in the skill. And then what it will do is it will slowly start to add those back to the empty form to know, okay, cool, we actually needed that. Let's put it back. We needed the next piece. Okay, let's put that back. Oh, we didn't need all of that English trash in there. Get rid of it. Until finally the grader can prove that every single thing inside here has passed in the way that it should. And so as this thing completes, I'll just show you this a little bit more practically. So when I kick this thing off, you can see that we have a folder over here called lab. This is just where it's running all of its tests, because remember, it's running a whole series of tests over and over again. We need that repetition, and we also need a few other things inside here. One of which is the bar, and this is the shape that we're setting for our test to run for the grader to mark things against. If we're looking at our AI news monitor, that could be something like the shape of the brief that it's outputting. And you can see here, it just talks about the tier structure, the bullet format, and all of the kinds of things that I would expect inside my AI newsletter. Then it just has a JSON file with a little bit of a structure in it and what gets put in that place as well. So again, all we're trying to do here is set a bar. And slowly but surely, this little thing is going to run through iterations until every single line of the AI news monitor skill earns its place within here and doesn't fail or matches the quality of what our original output was before we removed any. To illustrate that point a little bit further, say we're talking about something that involves taste, like the images that I spoke about. If we come and have a look at the sketchnote illustrator over here, you can see that it's got its control, which is the original baseline, the stub, which is where it's running its tests to see what it can do without all of that stuff that's inside skill.md. And in here we have our output, which is just an image. And then me as the human, I would come and take a look at this picture and say, yeah, this looks pretty much exactly the same as the one that was full of English prose, except this one is only 46 lines and we still get the same output. So really, I was just burning a bunch of tokens for absolutely no reason, and it's still just as accurate as it needs to be. So that's kind of this whole process in a nutshell. In terms of what to use to run this sort of thing, I'm using Opus 5 right now, but you can mix and match this. So you could use Fable and you could batch them if you wanted to. You could use some kind of fan-out methodology, or like that gauntlet skill that I covered last week. That would be a good use case for some of these that involve taste, because you can have that subcontext critic who can then go and review all of this stuff, and you can bake in some form of image analysis like we're doing with Sketchnote over here. But remember, the human definitely still needs to be involved. I'm hoping at some point that Anthropic updates its skill builder to make it more efficient at doing this stuff for us. But obviously it's still up to you to provide the AI agent a definition of what good looks like. So you still need to be very much involved in this process. So the TLDR of what to delete and keep, for the most part in the delete section, anything that is written in plain English that is not going to provide any value to the AI agent, you can absolutely get rid of that sort of thing. It usually comes down to things where you are giving it instructions that are pretty self-explanatory. Or one of the most popular use cases is when you're trying to get this thing to give interviews to people. All of the questions get put in the skill.md instead of in a script. If they were in the Python script, it costs you absolutely 0 tokens and it's super efficient. So things like that are what we want to delete from here. Things that we want to keep are more programming related. And if you had to look at the skill.md itself, it's definitely going to be things like gotchas, where there are specific things that can go wrong that the AI might not pick up and that you cannot remove from the skill or fix by changing the skill, because some gotchas, people are just lazy. They leave a gotcha in the skill.md instead of just fixing the skill. But the whole point here is to obviously test this as fast as you can using AI to delete everything that does not earn its place. In terms of the results that I've seen so far from this, the ones where we had absolutely no skill, we didn't end up using any single one of those because, like I said, it needs some form of guidance for what it's doing. This is just massively inefficient for most of the larger tasks that you're doing. When we look at the other two comparisons, you can see that the original roughly was about 215 lines. Some of them were up to 300, but for the majority of them, we either halved it or more once we ran this skill on it. And it comes down to something really simple. All of the schemas and the coding and the scripts, those are pretty much irreplaceable because, like I said, those are the deterministic workers that you should be relying on. And all of that prose and English language that we filled in there, we absolutely do not need most of that stuff in us. But that pretty much summarizes it for this video. Grab the skill down below and run this in a fresh environment. Copy some skills across, just like I showed you, and this should fix most of your problems. You can tinker with this skill. There are tons of different ways that we can run this. Like I said, I'm definitely going to be improving it over time. But I hope this video was helpful. Leave some comments down below. Otherwise, you can check out my community where I'm helping AI builders and consultants every single day. Thanks very much for watching. I'll see you guys later.